We're starting part. We got a doubleheader this week. I made a mistake. We got a doubleheader this week. Next week, the week after, we have a break. It's Emor is only one. Is one, and then so we have a 2-2-1 and a 2. A 2-2, a 1, and a 2. So, but okay. So on page 608, V'daber Hashem Moshe Lemor, V'daber Bnei Yisrael Lemor, Isha ki Tazria v'yolda zocher. When a woman conceives and then gives birth to a male, V'tama shivas yamim kimei nidas devoso titma. She's tummy for 7 days. This is by Torah law. Rabbinic law instituted more safeguards, but by Torah law, she's tummy for 7 days. Now, the first thing that we always want to ask is, nothing is random and haphazard. What's the connection between this and the previous Parsha? In the previous Parsha, if you're paying attention to I'm sure you were, paying attention to the laning. So it was talking about the various forbidden foods, which we spoke about last week, the various forbidden foods and the signs, the animal signs. And I think we spoke about it, right? Did we speak about it all last week? Maybe we didn't.
I think we...
I told you about the Chassam Sofer, about if you see an animal and you just think to yourself, I'm not allowed to eat it, it's a mitzvah.
No, we went to the beach instead.
Oh yeah, that was on Wednesday, right? Yeah, or you saw other animals. But there's a Chassam Sofer. It says when it comes to the forbidden animals, so there are three levels. Level 1 is where you smell non-kosher food. You say, boy, I really like to eat that, and the only reason I'm not is because the Torah says not to. Then you're getting a mitzvah. Level 2 is where you see the non-kosher food. You don't really want to eat it. But you remind yourself, even if I wanted to eat it, I wouldn't be allowed to because the Torah says, no, I'm not allowed to. That's a mitzvah. That itself is a mitzvah. Just looking at it and thinking to yourself, I'm not allowed to eat that because the Torah says so, that's a mitzvah. And then the Chassam Sofer says, and this is a novelty, I never knew this, even if you see a live animal, if you see a camel, and you think to yourself, you know what, I'm not allowed to eat that animal, the Chassam Sofer says that's a mitzvah. So my wife was recently talking about getting a pet rabbit because my grandchildren have a pet rabbit. So I told my wife this Chassam Sofer, I said, you get a pet rabbit, and then we can look at it and do mitzvahs all day, thinking about we can't eat the rabbit. So we're not getting a rabbit. I want no rabbits in the house. But I was thinking, if according to the Chassam Sofer, now he doesn't say this. This is only the way my strange mind works. But I guess if you look at a human being and think to yourself, well, I'm not allowed to eat him because the Torah says, so everybody you meet, Shalom Aleichem, you're my mitzvah. I am not allowed to consume you. So the Chassam Sofer doesn't say that, but that's where the Torah came off. It goes through all the various forbidden animals that we're not allowed to eat, and various rodents and creepy crawly creatures, and all sorts of things like that. Then the Torah starts out over here, and the Mefarshim say that take a look at the first Rashi. Isha ki Tazria, Amar Rav Simloi, Kishem sheyitziraso shalot amachar kol behima. Just as man's creation was at the end of the creation of all animals, all creatures, man's created on the seventh day and the sixth day. So too, the rules of a human being are also now elaborated on after the animals. Let's say creation. We spoke about the animals. Now we're talking about the human being. But what's interesting is that when we spoke about the animals. So it talks about the kosher signs, that they have to have split hooves and chew their cuds. Animals have to have split hooves and chew their cuds to be kosher. That's as far as the livestock. Birds have a different sign, fish have a different sign. But the question is, why is that a sign? Why is the chewing of the cud and the split hooves, why is that a sign for a kosher animal? What's the lesson? So Reb Chaim Kanievsky, that's all, he says like this. Split hooves it has to do with the feet. And so he makes a connection that it's a reminder to us to use our feet with zrizus when we serve God. That be energetic. It's the feet that carry us. So the kosher sign of the feet, exactly how he makes the distinction based on, but the idea being that the kosher sign of the feet Apparently, if it's got split hooves, it represents more speed than if it's one closed hoof. I don't know exactly what the symbolism is, but the idea is to remind us that in Avodas Hashem, we have to move with what's called zrizas. Zrizas is alacrity. You have to get up with energy in the morning. You don't jump out of bed, by the way. You don't jump out of bed, but you energize yourself out of bed. I think I told you once, they found medically, it is a good idea after you wake up to lie in bed for 12 seconds before pulling your head off the pillow. Now, what's remarkable about that is, when we're lying on the pillow, what do? Modeh ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam shechazarta bi nishmasi b'chemla rabba emunasecha. 12 words. What a coincidence. 12 words before and you're not supposed to just pop up and jump out of bed. But we should get up with energy. In the old days, they didn't have a snooze alarm. Snooze alarm causes a lot of snoozing. So, which is exactly why it's called a snooze alarm. So by the way, the one I was thinking of is the one with Cheech and Chong, when we speak of Cheech and Chong. What I was thinking of, it's not a song, it's that routine. It goes, class, class, class. You ever hear that one? The teacher, where they're all getting unruh, and they yell, she gives a yell, Ashrai. And that was, I think, their first routine on the radio. That was before the songs. So, okay, got that out of my system. So the split hooves represents zrizas, represents being, doing avodas Hashem with energy. The chewing the cud represents how consistency. Animal chews it, brings it up. Chews it, brings it up. Chews it, brings it up. Chews it. We got to get up every morning and daven, and we got to get up every day and put on tefillin, and we got to go every day, and you have to learn Gemara, and you have to learn it over, and you have to review it, and review it, and review it, and review it. That's the symbol of the kosher animal. That's what Reb Chaim Kanievsky suggests. Okay. The same way that animals have a kosher sign, Jews also have a kosher sign. What is the kosher sign? One of the kosher signs is immersion in the mikveh. Because when somebody converts to Judaism, what do they have to do? They have to immerse in the mikveh to become a Jew. A woman, in order to live with her husband after she has become impure, she has to immerse in a mikveh in order to even begin having a child. So the first sign of a Jew is the immersion in the mikveh. And the second sign of a kosher Jew is bris milah. And so you have over here that follows the signs of the animals. You're followed with the signs of a Jew, so to speak. Number one. Number two, the word zochar, daber el b'nei Yisrael bar isha ki Tazria v'yolda zochar. So the word zochar, it could also, you remember in the Torah there are no vowels. The word zochar could be read as zecher. Zecher means to remember. It's a reminder or a memory. And the idea is that man was created last because he's the pinnacle of creation. Who comes into the room last? First, everybody assembles, then the president walks in. The whole ceremony is for the most important person. Most important person comes in last. Man is created last for two reasons. If you're good, then you realize, as the Medrash says, if you're good, you realize that the entire creation was created for you. If you're not good, then remind yourself that even a flea was created before you. You're insignificant. Even a flea was created for you. It cuts both ways. Being created last cuts both ways. If you're deserving, then realize you're the pinnacle of creation. The whole thing is here for you. And you enter, ta-da-da-da-da-da, here he is. Here's the star of the show. And the star comes in. That's if you're good. Zecher, zochar, v'yolda zochar, she gives birth to a male, is also the same word as zecher, meaning that this is only worthwhile, we're only the pinnacle creation if we remember what our purpose is in life. You remember that God created the world, that we should serve him, then it's zecher, zochar, and then you're the pinnacle of creation. If you forget about it, so then then even a flea, even an insignificant flea, was created before you. Now, the other idea here is that the entire Parsha is going to be talking about tsaras, leprosy. It's going to be talking about leprosy and various signs of leprosy. What's the most common cause of leprosy? Lashon hara. Now, the truth of the matter is that it also comes because of haughtiness. It could come because there's a pasuk, which we're going to see later, a pasuk in Mishli, where there are seven traits that God despises And those seven, any of those seven could trigger off. But the most common connection that people make, exactly what you're saying, is Lashon Hara. So the question here again is, and what's the connection to the previous Parsha? Why we'll talk about the first few psukim about the woman giving birth, but they immediately get into tsaras and what's the connection? Yeah.
Oh, I was going to ask that if tsaras is coming from Lashon Hara, it doesn't seem like we would speak less Lashon Hara today than we did many years
ago. Well, let's wait till we get there. No, we don't. But let's because we don't. Let's wait till we get there for a second. But the point here is, what's the connection? Again, I'm just connecting to the previous parsha, just an introduction. What's the connection to the previous parsha? This is something we forgot. What are you saying, Afla?
Well, just based on what we just said, that you have to quarantine for 7 days. You're impure when you have tsaras.
Okay, we're going to see that. We're going to see about that quarantine is. We'll see about that. Here, the connection is that the previous parsha was talking about what shouldn't go into your mouth. Now we're going to talk about what shouldn't come out of your mouth. And if we were as careful about what comes out of our mouth as we are about what comes into our mouth, we'd be okay. But it's unfortunately we're not. I can only speak for myself. When it comes to kashrus, everybody's all, this you're checking all the kashrus. They ought to have hechsherim on speech, right? You had a kashrus supervision on speech. Just kind of put one in our forehead, badats, put some sort of sign to as a reminder to us of the kashrus of speech. Okay, now the other idea here is like this. It says, Isha kisa zria v'yolda zachar. When she said, the word zorea literally means to plant. You plant seeds. And obviously a woman who gets pregnant, the seed has been planted. There's a pasuk that says, Hazorim bedima, those who plant with tears, Hazorim bedima berino yiksora. We say that in Shira Malos. Hazorim bedima, if you plant with tears, Hazorim bedima berina yiktzor, you will harvest it in joy. And that is a projection of many things in life. When you invest and you learn a piece of Gemara. So Bini, torturing the Rebbe over there. Good, that's what Rebbes are for. Don't let them off the hook. You chase them down to the ground. But it's hard. It's hard. You got to work and you got to think and you got to work through it, Tosos. But when you finally do, when you put in, you invest, and it's tears, it's blood, sweat, and tears. And when you finally get it, then you harvest it with joy. And there's nothing in life that is going to get you anywhere. I mean, once in a while, if you have a rich uncle and he leaves you a pile, so that didn't take much. A story about this guy. This guy's really rich. So somebody says to him, how did you make it? How did I make it? How did I make it? When I was 9 years old, I was running a paper route. When I was 14, I was mowing lawns. When I was 18, I was working in a McDonald's. And when I was 22, I had a rich uncle who kicked the bucket and left me a wad. That's how I made it. Okay, so once in a while that happens. You buy a lottery ticket and you win. Should happen to me soon. Amen. But it doesn't always work that way. It doesn't always work. Usually in life, anybody who's accomplished anything, it came from blood and sweat. That's where it came, and tears. So there's an interesting, it says that when Avram Avinu marries Hagar, so he marries Hagar, and she gets pregnant the first time they're together. And the Medrash says that Hagar was thinking to herself, that's Sarah. I guess she's not the tzaddikus that she's cracked up to be. I mean, here she's living with the man for 70 years and doesn't get pregnant. I live one night with him and I'm already pregnant. I don't know about that Sarah Imenu. So there's a Chassam Sofer that says, sure, you got pregnant right away. And what did you have? You had a Yishmael. To have a Yishmael doesn't take much. To have a Yitzchak, took years and years of crying and tefillah and avodas Hashem to earn a Yitzchak. To get a Yishmael doesn't take anything. To get a Yitzchak, that's Hazorim Bedima Berina Yiksora. You sowed the earth with tears, then you're going to harvest in joy. Parents have to invest. Person has to invest in himself, and you invest. It's difficult, it's challenging, but eventually a person harvests in joy. That's why it says, Isha ki Tazria v'yolda zachar. You want to bear a male, a real zachar, somebody worthwhile, then it's going to have to be azurim b'dima ri'ikshar. Not all the time. Sometimes there are plenty of women who get pregnant right away and have wonderful children. But the lesson is that you can't look at Sarei Menu and therefore come to conclusions that she's not a tzedekis. Look at Sarei Menu and come to a different conclusion. That's why it's data. How do you read data over here? I guess she's not a tzedekis. This is one way to read the data. The other way to read the data is she's a very big tzedekis, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is withholding a child because he values her tears and her tefillah, and eventually she's going to end up with a Yitzchak. Okay, idea number one. Pasuk Gimel. Uvayom hashmini yimol b'sar loso. On the 8th day, he circumcised. Now, if you'll notice, first of all, it says uvayom hashvi. There's a vav. A vav. By the way, the word vav means a hook. That's why the vav in the Torah, the vav looks like a hook. It looks like a hook, and a vav means a hook. So often a vav is a connecting word. What's this vav connection of uvayom hashvi? What's it got to do with what came beforehand? The answer is that the previous pasuk talks about a woman who gave birth. She becomes a nida, but that means that she's keeping the laws of nida. The keeping taharas hamishpacha, the laws of marital purity, is itself a merit that can help people to have a child, a boy. Not every couple that keeps Taharas HaMishpacha does, but in other words, the value of the mitzvah itself, this is a very important concept I want to tell you. Sometimes you see statements in the Gemara or in Chazal, the Gemara will make a statement, somebody who does this gets this. If you do give tzedakah, you'll get rich. If you learn Torah, the Mishnah period says people who learn Torah under extenuating circumstances, difficult circumstances, will eventually learn Torah with prosperity. But you don't always see it. You don't always see it. So the Mefarshim explain that when the Gemara makes a statement like that, that sounds like an absolute thank you. It sounds like an absolute statement. It's not what it's not. It means if all else was equal, that's the potential value of this mitzvah. The potential value of the mitzvah of learning Torah when you're poor, the potential value of that mitzvah is that you'll learn Torah with prosperity. Yeah, but there are other factors. What about the fact that maybe one day you missed putting on tefillin, or maybe one day you ate something not kosher, one day you didn't give enough tzedakah. There are other extenuating circumstances. It's only, what the classic example is? Classic example is the Gemara says, if you answer Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah with all your strength, and Rashi says all your strength means all your kavana. Sometimes you get in the shul, and guys yell Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah. I don't know if you've been there. You probably have. Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah sounds like you got to make a bracha on thunder, the way these guys are. Right? And you hear Amen Yehei Shmei. Why? Because they learned the Gemara. The Gemara says if you answer, the Gemara uses the expression b'chol kocho, with all your might. But Rashi says all your might means with all your kavana. Kavana could be very quiet also. So if you answer Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah, where it says you merit 70 good years. How do you like that? Now, there's a problem, because the Gemara also says, if somebody soils his mouth, if somebody goes to a wedding, the Gemara says everybody knows why a bride is getting married. And if somebody soils his mouth and makes dirty jokes, 70 good years could be turned into 70 bad years. So which one is it? So a guy goes to the wedding, and they have a minyan for Mariv, and at Mariv he answers, Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah. Now he's got 70 good years coming. And then at the chuppah he starts making dirty jokes. Now they got 70 bad years, so which one is it? You understand? There's only HaKadosh Baruch Hu with a super computer can weigh up. Here, the Vav is telling you the merit of the mitzvah of keeping family purity, of Isha Kimei Nidas Devosa Titma, and then she purifies herself. The merit of keeping that mitzvah can bring a couple a child. Number one. Number two, let me ask you a question. And this is very, very, very important for us to understand this. There was a Rav in a community, I think he was in South America. He was a Rav of a community, and the community wasn't really Torah observant. And he was a Rav. A couple had a baby. Now, we learn from the Torah on the 8th day, Bris Milah is done, even if it comes out on Shabbos, and even if it comes out on Rosh Hashanah, and even if it comes out on Yom Kippur. I have a grandson who had a Rosh Hashanah bris, and I've been at a Yom Kippur bris. And we learned from the Torah. Now here you're doing something which is what we would call an elective surgery. It's not a life-threatening surgery. Life-threatening surgery, you do it's Pikuach Nefesh. You do it on Shabbos, you do it on Yom Kippur if it's life-threatening. An elective surgery you never do on Shabbos. Not only that, if the baby, for whatever reason, can't have the bris on the 8th day, say the baby is jaundiced a little bit. That's not uncommon. The babies are what they call yellow. They're born with a high bilirubin count. So what they do is they put them under the lights for a couple of days. So, and it's very, very, very common. Now, as long as the baby's number hasn't gone down on whatever measures the bilirubin, I think it's 15 on the bilirubin count, or if the baby has an eye infection, if the baby has any sort of infection, which is also not uncommon, the baby develops an eye infection. There have been brises where the tables are set, the mole is there, the knife is out, and at the last minute, the mole takes a look at the baby and says, we're not doing a bris today, because the baby may develop a fever, or the baby's got an infection or something. Once a bris is put off, then you do not do it on Shabbos. So if the baby, let's say, they couldn't do the bris on the 8th day came out, let's say, on a Thursday, and they couldn't do the bris on the 8th day or the 9th day. By the 10th day, the baby is healthy, but it's Shabbos, you don't do the bris. But if it's the 8th day comes out, bullseye, smack on Shabbos, then you do the bris, even though it's an elective surgery, which is prohibited on Shabbos. Why? Because the Torah says so. Torah says this. You also bring a korban on Shabbos. So the Torah says this overrides Shabbos. Okay, now, this rabbi asked a question to the Tzitz Eliezer. The Tzitz Eliezer was one of the great poskim of the previous generation. I think he was nifter maybe 25, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. He was in our contemporary. And the Tzitz Eliezer was asked the following question. This rabbi is the rabbi of a really non-observant community somewhere in South America, and a couple had a baby. They were traditional. They were going to do a bris, and the bris came out on Shabbos. But he also knew that if people are going to come to the bris on Shabbos, there are going to be a lot of people driving. So he wanted to know, should we put off the bris for Sunday, just like you find that we don't blow shofar if it comes out on Shabbos, because there was a concern people would carry the shofar. We don't do a lulav and esrog on Shabbos, if you're what do you call it, and we don't read the Megillah on Shabbos, because there's a concern people are going to carry it. So he wanted to know, knowing that there's going to be Shabbos desecration, he wanted to know, should we just put off the bris on Shabbos, just like you see that in the Gemara, they put off things for the sake of Shabbos. What would you say? And why? What do you say?
They're going to go to Shabbos anyway.
What's that?
They're going to go to Shabbos anyway. So why is it? It's not the bris that they're coming for. It's the.
Well, I don't know. Maybe they'd stay home and maybe they hear you're causing them to come to the bris. I don't know. Maybe they stay home and watch a football game on Shabbos. You don't know for sure they're going to go somewhere on Shabbos. Here you go. That's part of the idea of inviting people for the sake of kiruv on Shabbos, where they're going to drive to your house. Or the argument that they're going to drive anyway, I don't know if they're going to drive anyway. I cannot be the catalyst of them desecrating Shabbos. What do you say, Ben?
Well, I was just hearing yesterday that there's this concept of the 8th day being beyond Teva. We were getting into that with Parsha Shemini. So the Bris Milah seems, considering it's the 8th day, it seems to be getting into that. And if it's truly beyond Teva, beyond what Hashem created.
Yeah, but their desecration of Shabbos isn't beyond Teva. Their desecration of Shabbos is very much within Teva. I hear what you're saying.
The 8th day falling out on the 7th.
There's something
beyond.
So okay, it's true. That's why we do it on the 8th day. The question is, those are very interesting. What we call inyanim. That's very, very, very spiritual. Halacha always overrides spiritual. That means I'll get to you 1 second. That means the classic example is you have two people eating the korban pesach. This is the classic example. Right? You have one guy who eats the korban pesach because I love roast lamb, boy, am I hungry. He doesn't think a word, doesn't think a thing about the Korban Pesach. He just says, I love roast lamb. And 1 minute before Chatzos, he eats the roast lamb. You have a second guy who has every Kabbalistic intention in eating the Korban Pesach, and he eats it 1 minute after Chatzos. He's Chayiv Kares. He did not fulfill the mitzvah of Korban Pesach. So spirituality is a wonderful thing, but halacha always trumps spirituality. Now, the question here is, do you push off the bris because for the sake of Shabbos? What do you say, Andrew?
Well, the bris already is, like we already said, that because it's an elective surgery, but you're doing it on Shabbos anyway because it's that important.
But it's not a desecration of Shabbos. That's a mitzvah. And here, by doing this mitzvah, you're going to cause Shabbos desecration. Do you push it off? What do you say, Naftali? Last one.
Oh, I had a yes and a no, but I'm gonna go with the no because I think it's a no answer, and that is the whole purpose of becoming a Jew is to keep Shabbos. So the fact that you push it off, that's the whole essence of this person becoming a Jew. These guys, whether they see it or they not, are gonna know that that's the purpose of being a Jew, and therefore
for the good sake of Kiruv. Yeah, it's got Kiruv. No, we don't desecrate Shabbos for Kiruv. We are going to influence them. You're saying that because of the influence on the people who will drive over, and that is something that's something we do not do. Okay, so I'll answer your question. The answer to the question is, first of all, we can never make comparisons to what the Tzitz Eliezer wrote back. First thing is, we can't make decrees. We don't make a decree. We don't make safeguards that the Gemara did not make. In the time of the Gemara, Chazal could make a safeguard. No lulav, no Megillah, no, what was the third one? No lulav, no Megillah, no shofar on Shabbos. Because Chazal have that strength as a Beis Din to make that takana. You can't go and make a takana, number one. Number two, so therefore you do not have that authority. With all your good intentions, you don't have that authority. That's first of all. Number two, there's another major difference. In the time of the Gemara, when they did make those safeguards, that was for people who wanted to keep Shabbos, but just in case they'll mess up unintentionally, so a safeguard was put in. Here you talk about people who aren't interested in keeping Shabbos at all. I can make safeguards for them. The safeguard is for Jews who are conscientious and are making every effort to keep Shabbos. Here, there's no conscientious effort. To the contrary, they're willing to desecrate Shabbos. There's no safeguard there. But that's not the main reason. The main reason is we don't have the authority to tamper. That's the main reason. They'll drive, they won't drive. That's not up to us when we have to do the mitzvah. You don't have to invite somebody to your house on Shabbos for the sake of Kiruv if they're going to drive on Shabbos. That's not your obligation. It's not here you have a son. The son has to be sacrificed. I was going to say sacrifice. It is, by the way. It's called a form of it's called a korban of sorts. The moel refers to the lap of the sandak is a mizbeach. When he hands the baby to the father and tells the baby, okay, put the baby on the lap is a mizbeach and the baby is the korban. That's why it's such a but he's right. The bris milah is beyond, it transcends nature, and it's the eighth day and everything about it. But at the end of the day, we don't have the authority to go and make up rules and make takanas exerts. The only time there's authority nowadays, a rav of a community could make rules for his community, but he can't go and make a general takana for the Jewish people. There's no Beis Din. We don't have that authority nowadays to make decrees for the Jewish people. Somebody once suggested to the big rabbi, they should make a decree that nobody should live on a high floor where you need to rely on elevators on Shabbos. Besides the silliness of the idea, Rabbanan, there's no Beis Din today that can make a decree. Nobody live beyond the sixth floor of an apartment. Nobody can make it. The idea is a silly idea. But nobody can make a decree. There's no rabbinic court. A rav of a community can make a certain rule in the community, like you have by the Hasidim. And this, by the way, is one of the reasons I envy the Hasidim. For example, by the Ger Hasidim, they have a rule that when you make a wedding, you can't have more than, I think, 200 guests. Because that way it alleviates pressure from those who can't afford a bigger wedding. One guy actually went to the Ger Rebbe, I think it was the Beis Yisrael. He went to the Beis Yisrael, and he said to him, Rebbe, I know that we're limited to 200, but I'm a man of means. maybe I could, I could make a bigger wedding. So the Rebbe said to him, well, maybe you should get yourself a different Rebbe. Right? No, that's a rule. He could make that rule. They could make another rule. In Ger, they have a rule, I think, that a couple that gets married is not allowed to buy if I got it, they're not allowed to buy a flat in Yerushalayim for the first 5 years of their marriage. Because that puts pressure on those who can't afford it. It's a young couple, you want to go buy in Netivot, go buy in Tzfat, go buy where real estate is cheap. But he has the authority to make that rule. One of the reasons I'm envious of the Hasidim is because the Hasidim, when the Rebbe says jump, you ask how high and how long should I stay up there, and therefore that there's a certain strength that the Hasidim have. But a Rav of a Kehila could also make certain rules. A Rav has certain rules. Through Jewish history, they had very strong rules. In Europe, before in Europe, the Beis Din could actually sentence a person to a humiliation. A Jew who was a Jew who desecrated certain halachas, a Jew who didn't behave properly, they put him in the stocks right outside the shul. The Beis Din would rule that he's to be put in the stocks, where you got your hands, you're trapped, and everybody walking in the shul and spits on him. They call him Poshei Yisrael. Yeah. Not only that, I think at the time of the Rishon, there was a Kohen who was married to a divorcee, and the Beis Din paskin that they have to get divorced, and he didn't want to divorce the divorcee, and he's not allowed to be married to her. And then what they were going to do is they were going to go live somewhere else. So the Beis Din severed his fingertips, so that he wouldn't do Birkas Kohanim, because he's not allowed to do Birkas Kohanim as long as he's married to a Grusha. The time of the Gemara says they severed somebody's hand. Somebody was running around punching people. The Beis Din told him to stop. They fined him, and he kept punching people. I think it was Rav Huna. So Rav Huna's Beis Din. They severed his hand. Guess what? After that, he stopped punching people. How do you like that? Was that? It's just a flesh wound, like in Monty Python. It was. And listen, you can't let your society disintegrate. The guys go around. So the point is that the Tzitz Eliezer said we don't have that authority nowadays. You can't go do that. What are you saying, Andrew? Okay. Yeah.
So was he able to, in that community, enforce that you can't do the bris?
No, because you could make rules, but you can't push aside Torah law. We don't have that authority. It's a very, very important concept to know. We don't have the authority nowadays to tamper with the Torah. Very important to know that. Even the Beis Din, we don't have a Sanhedrin, we don't have a Beis Din, we don't have that authority. At the time of the Gemara, that's why when it says that the Gemara was a sealed book, because the Talmud Bavli is a sealed book. That means that whatever they decreed, and what they decreed was always with a Beis Din. It was always a Beis Din. It wasn't one man came along and made a decree. They don't have the right to go in and make nobody could go and make decrees on the Jewish people. Okay, now, there's one other idea here. Why is it, there are 19 brachas in Shmon Esrei? That's one of the ironies of Jewish life. It's called the 18, and there are 19 brachas. But then again, flogging in the Torah is called Malkus Arboim, and there are only 39. But here we have, so the answer is originally there were 18 brachas. Then they added the 19th bracha, which was about V'la Malshinim. V'la Malshinim, but the one that we say every day, V'la Malshinim al tihi sikva v'chol harisha kerega toved v'chol oivecha mehira yikaresa. The bracha of V'la Malshinim was the 19th one. And according to some of the nusuchs, it was actually V'la Minim. And the Minim were the early Christians. They added a bracha to the men of the Great Assembly who formulated the 18 brachas. A 19th bracha was added about the downfall. There should be the downfall of the Christians, the early Christians, the Minim. And we call it nowadays La Malshinim, informers and all the no-goodniks. Now, the 8th bracha, the Gemara in Megillah says, what's the 8th bracha in Shemon Esrei? Rifa'inu Hashem v'nei Rafeh. Cure us, Hashem, heal us. And the Gemara says, why is the 8th bracha Rifa'inu?
Day of the bris.
Because the bris milah is on the 8th day, and the baby needs a refuah. That's one of the ironies of bris milah. You say, make a bracha, you make a lachniso bevritza shel Avraham Avinu. In Eretz Yisrael, we make a shechianu. I think in Chutz La'aretz they don't make a shechianu. In Eretz Yisrael, make a shechianu on the bris, and it's a simcha. And right after the bris is finished, they name the baby, and then the moil says, Mishaberach avoseinu Avraham hu yavrach hu yarape as hachola. He gives them a mishaberach because now the baby is a chola. He needs a refuah. So they made the refuah on the 8th day. That's why. Why? The Gemara says because of bris milah. What's the obvious question?
There's a lot more healing after the 8th day.
Besides that, I thought you started off well when you said there's a lot more. You started off well. What's the obvious question?
There's a lot more people
That what?
need healing.
Of course. Yeah, there are a lot of illnesses, unfortunately, in the world. Why? Because bris milah is on the 8th day, and bris milah is minor compared to some of the other illnesses. So why is bris milah the one that they made refainu for? The answer is because in the future, in Yemos HaMashiach, there won't be any more illness. There's only be one situation where somebody needs a refuah, which is going to be bris milah still going to be around. And the baby's going to need a refuah from bris milah. So they made it on the 8th bracha for Rifainu, for the bris milah, because that's the only illness that's going to be around. Okay. Now, we get to the nitty gritty. Not yet. One more. One more. And this is also going to sound strange. So a woman who is, let's pick it up from Pasuk Gimel. Vayom hashmini imo b'sara laso, ushloshim yom ushloshes yomim teshev b'dmei tahara. A woman who experiences bleeding, under normal circumstances, as soon as a woman experiences bleeding, she becomes tameh. She's a nida. Here, a woman after 7 days of birth, and 4 lines from the top, after 7 days of birth, she now has a 33-day stretch where during that 33 days, even if she bleeds, she's considered permissible to her husband. It's not regular, it's not considered the same as regular nida bleeding. And therefore, the Torah says for the next 33 days, it's what's called demei tahara. What do they call it? Blood of purity? Blood of purity. That's exactly the way it translates that. But she's got a limitation about coming in contact with holy things. B'chol kodesh lo siga v'al mikdash lo savad mosimei Torah. She's not allowed to enter the Beis HaMikdash, but she's permissible to her husband for 33 days. Now, v'im nekeva teled. Let's say she gives birth to a female. V'tama shvuayim kinidasa. Then for 14 days she's tameh. 14 days. The way male it's 7 days, by female it's 14 days. V'shishim yom v'sheshes yameim tishev al dein Torah. But then she gets a double jeopardy on the purity days. Then 66 days. She's considered, the blood is considered pure. Now, what happens after this? We're going to come back to this. Uvim los yemei tahara leveno levas. After the day the purity period is over, Tavi keves ben shnaso laola, uven yona otor lechatas. She brings a sheep as a burnt offering, and she brings a dove, or how does he translate yona to a turtle dove or a young dove? How was he?
Young dove or a turtle dove.
A young dove or a turtle dove as a sin offering. El Pesach al Moed al HaKohen. Why in the world does a woman who gave birth have to bring a sin offering? What did she do wrong? She has to bring a sin offering.
Maybe her thoughts weren't so pure in the pains of labor.
What were the thoughts that are not pure? You're right on target. What thoughts? He said, maybe her thoughts weren't so pure. I wouldn't use the word pure, but her thought, maybe, let's call it inappropriate. Maybe her thoughts were inappropriate. What was the inappropriate thought? Ow is not an inappropriate thought. You know, ow is not even a thought. Ow is a reaction. Boy, oh boy, boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I just want to tell you something. The first time my wife gave birth, and I took her into the hospital, I had seen her doing Lamaze. Lamaze is with the labor coach, and their breathing exercises. What do I know? You know, I'm watching her, and you know they do all sorts and make all sorts of breathing. And then they go, so I thought, you know, you go, poo, 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 out comes the baby. and then we get to the hospital, and she's in active labor, and we get to the hospital, And the lady's taking she's standing there, she says, she's filling out a form, the nurse is filling out a form, what was it? And all of a sudden I hear a blood-curdling scream, ah, like that. And the nurse, and it's a scream stops, and the nurse says to me, I'm sorry, was that a B or a D? And I said to her, what was that? She goes, what? I said, I heard somebody screaming down the hall. I expected to see, doctors running, blue lights flashing, code blue. I said, oh, that's just a woman in labor. Shalom, Sunny Isha. Shalom, Sunny Isha. It hurts like the blazes. That's what the women claim anyway. So it hurts. It could hurt. So, but what? Okay, what an inappropriate thought.
I don't want
Get this thing out of me.
No, that's nothing wrong with that.
I don't want this baby anymore.
Not I don't want the baby.
Cursed be the one who caused this pain.
Oh, very close. Not cursed be the one who causes pain. She makes a vow either internally or verbally, I am never going to live with my husband again and get into this situation. That's what the Gemara says. She either thinks a vow or actively makes a vow. Now, the vow is not valid because a woman doesn't have a right to deprive her husband of his rights, but she made a vow. And therefore, as a result of this vow that she either thought or made, even though it's not a valid vow, she has to bring a korban chatas. That's one idea. The ola also, but the chatas specifically is the sin offering. Now, one of the Meforshim says there's another idea here. You see, a woman who's pregnant, now she knows she's going into a birth, which very, very low percentage chance, but it is a potentially life-threatening, or remember, and there sometimes chas v'sholom, there can be complications in the baby. We want the baby to be healthy. Women get nervous towards the birth. People who are nervous, often, whether verbally or in their mind, they make all sorts of commitments to be good. Okay, no more lashon hara, and I'm going to be tznius, and I'm going to make sure supper's ready for my husband every day when he comes home, and I'm not going to fight with my neighbor, and I'm going to treat my mother-in-law better, and I'm going to, stop yelling at my kids. You make all sorts of pledges. When you're in that sort of situation, you vow to be good. Then she gives birth, and Baruch Hashem, she's okay, and the baby's healthy, and then you're back to normal. So there's been she reverts to herself. For that, you need to bring a sin offering. You had pushed yourself up mentally into a heightened state, and you didn't follow through with it. Which is, by the way, happens to many people, many times. You got to go there. If Hashem saves me, then I'll do this, I'll do that. I'll learn Daf Yomi, and I'll put out tefillin in my wear. And then he comes through the surgery, everything is okay, or the test results come back and everything's okay, and then he reverts right back to himself. For that, you need a chatas. Unfortunately, that's why she need a chatas. Now, why is there a double impurity period if she has a girl instead of a boy?
She knows the girl will experience her pain.
You're close again. The same way that a woman becomes impure, she just brought another source of impurity into the world. A girl will also go through. Okay, number one. Number two, if a woman makes a vow not to be with her husband, when do you think she's going to regret that vow sooner? After a boy or after a girl? Do you know there's a different bracha you make when you have a boy than when you have a girl? When you have a girl, you make a shechayanu. It's a wonderful bracha. So, you brought a life into the world. When you have a boy, the bracha is hatovu metiv, which is a higher level bracha. Why? Because bottom line is, what is it that the couple wants? They want a boy. That's human nature. It's not limited to Jews. Goyim also, a boy. There's something, it's a boy. I just had a friend who now I have a friend who had he has 5 kids. His oldest child is 9 years old, and they just had a baby after 9 years. They just had a baby, a girl. And everybody was happy. We were very thrilled for the couple. But guess what? If it was a boy, it'd be a major celebration. That's the way it is. I didn't write the rules. Not only that, I saw it myself. I had one of my children, my wife had a little bit of a complication towards the end of the pregnancy. So she had to be in the hospital on what's called Shmirat Hirayon. They have to just keep her under supervision in the hospital. So I go to the hospital every day. Now, it's the only ward in the hospital. It's a happy place to be, is the maternity ward. And every time I'd come into the hospital, the nurses at a certain point would be going off shift. And these are women. And so the nurse going off shift, the one coming on shift would say, okay, what's happening with Mrs. Goldberg? She had a girl. Mazel tov. What happened with Mrs. Levin? She had a boy. Mazel tov! It was blatant how the nurses favored the boys over the girls. It was ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And that was the women. And I've seen it in other places, like when we had our babies, you go into a doctor, and there are women in the doctor's office. You got a little baby, and there's an older lady there. She says, hi, what's the baby's name? Rachel. Oh, Rachel, hi, Mom, very nice. Then she goes right back to her reading. And when the boy, what's the baby's name? Shimon. Yeah, can I hold the baby? It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. So a woman who gives birth, she wants a boy also. You know why a woman wants a boy? Because she knows her husband's going to be happier with the boy. I'm telling you hard facts, gentlemen.
And more things to fix.
And what's that?
More things to fix in the male neshama.
Yeah, well, nobody needs to work. But and I'll tell you the truth of the matter is girls are easier. Girls are easier. You're worried about them more, but raising them, they're easier. They stay closer to home, and they boys, you can get a call from the police department. He's been arrested. He punched a cop. No girl's going to punch a cop. But girls will drive you nuts as teenagers. They will actually drive you to drink, but they stay loyal and they'll take care of you when you're old. Boys are more fun, but boys are unpredictable. Anything could happen with boys. The woman who gives birth to a boy, her regret of the vow will take place sooner because there was so much simcha involved. So after 7 days, okay, all right, well, we'll have another one. Whereas with a girl, it takes 14 days. That's what and none of this is coming from me, by the way. None of this is coming from me. With a girl, it's 14 days. That's what the first. Okay, tomorrow we'll start with Saras. That means we got to speak some Lashon Hara.